Sometimes rejection doesn't arrive with shouts and arguments. It comes as a soft sentence, spoken calmly, as if it doesn't hurt. It was a Monday afternoon. No storm, no yelling, nothing to foreshadow what was coming. We were at home, on the sofa, watching a series she loved and which I pretended to enjoy, just to share something with her. I turned to her, moved a lock of hair from her face, and caressed the back of her neck. That silly, affectionate gesture that used to make her smile. But she didn't smile. She pulled away gently, with the kind of rejection that isn't offensive, but hurts more because it seems so polite. And then she said it, as if it were nothing. Hey, don't take this the wrong way, but please, just leave me alone for a bit. I need my space. I didn't understand. Or maybe I didn't want to. I just sat there, quiet, my mouth half open, as if she had spoken in another language. Space from what? From us? From me? She said it while still looking at the screen, without giving me her face, without lending me her eyes. She forced me to process it alone. When I insisted, asking if something had happened, if she was angry about something I had missed, she just said no. It was nothing serious. She just needed to think. I'm just in a weird place, she said. I need to be with myself for a while. With myself? Another one of those modern phrases that just reeks of emotional distance. I didn't argue. In that moment, I didn't know how. I simply felt it, retreated, leaving her on the sofa with her series and her private world. I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, took a deep breath, and waited for my pulse to slow. I felt humiliated, but mostly confused, because we hadn't fought. There was no clear trigger. In fact, that very morning, I had surprised her with her favorite breakfast. I wasn't perfect, but damn it, I tried. And this was what I got? Space? Not a conversation, not a we need to talk, just distance. A wall, built without warning. We slept in the same bed that night, but we didn't touch. She turned her body to the wall. I stared at the ceiling like an idiot, wondering if this was temporary or the beginning of something bigger, something irreversible. Sometime in the early morning, I heard her check her phone, type a quick reply, and place it back on the nightstand without a sound. I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to seem jealous. But I thought it. I thought of someone else, another conversation, another version of her that I didn't know. The same woman I had shared years with was now asking me for space the way you'd offer someone a seat on the train, politely, but with no desire to ever see them again. The next day, I didn't ask her how she was. I didn't make her coffee. I didn't touch her on my way out the door. It wasn't for revenge. It was instinct. Something inside me understood that love doesn't always die with a scream. Sometimes it just fades out with sentences spoken far too calmly. And that was the first one. I need space. A seemingly harmless phrase, but that day, it was the beginning of everything that came after. For the first few days, I moved awkwardly, unsure what to do with this space she had requested. Should I avoid her? Talk to her less? Sleep in another room? She gave no instructions. She just threw the phrase into the air and carried on with her routine as if nothing had happened. I, on the other hand, felt like something inside me had been knocked out of place. I started waking up earlier, to avoid her in the kitchen. I stayed later at work, and every night when we went to bed, she would settle on her side, far from me, without a single sign of guilt, as if this was the new and natural order. Two bodies in the same bed with a frozen ocean between them. I started counting the silences, measuring how long we could go without her asking me a single question. Not, "How are you?" Not, "How was your day?" Nothing. Just practical, dry replies with no warmth, no skin. There was no yelling, no contempt, no open tension. Just that elegant kind of indifference that makes you feel unnecessary without a single word. And at first, of course, it hurt. My body ached from not touching her. My soul ached watching her, seeing that she didn't seem to miss a single thing. And still, I said nothing. Because I had my pride, because I didn't want to seem needy. As the days passed, something strange began to happen. The anxiety started to fade. I stopped checking my phone every 2 minutes, hoping for some gesture from her. I no longer felt obligated to fill the air with forced conversation. I started to enjoy the drives in the car without her voice, to eat alone without feeling lonely. And that's when I understood the space she had asked for wasn't just for her. It was liberating me, too. It was giving me back a corner of myself I had abandoned to be her perfect partner, her support, her stability, her everything. And how exhausting it is to be everything to someone who no longer wants even a part of you. During one of those soulless lunch breaks, I decided to walk into a restaurant near my office. It wasn't new. I'd seen it 1,000 times, but had never stopped. I sat at a table for one, ordered without much enthusiasm, and then she appeared, the waitress. Dark hair in a low ponytail, eyes that were tired but warm. It wasn't a magical appearance or love at first sight. It was something more human, simpler, an authentic smile, a "How's your day going?" said with genuine interest. Something I no longer heard at home. I was surprised at how naturally I answered, as if that small, kind gesture had thawed a part of me I had already written off as dead. I went back the next day and the day after that. Not for the food, which was fine, but for that smile, for that soft voice that called me honey without a hidden agenda. We started talking about small things: the weather, the traffic, the coffee that always gets cold before she can finish it. And without realizing it, I found myself waiting for my lunch break, not to eat, but to see her. It wasn't attraction, not yet. It was peace, a simple, warm peace, something that no longer existed in my own home. And the strangest part was realizing that while I was learning to breathe again on my own, she hadn't even noticed I was no longer breathing for her. On Thursday, I forgot to text her. It wasn't planned, not some passive aggressive strategy. It just happened. I left work, ate at the restaurant, talked for a while with the waitress, Anna. Her name was Anna, I learned that day. And then I sat on a bench in a nearby park, watching people pass by without a hurry. It was a sunny but cold day, the kind that doesn't seem to hurt your skin, but seeps into your bones. At some point, I pulled out my phone out of habit, unlocked it, and saw her chat at the top of the screen. Not a "How are you?" Not a "See you later." Nothing. And for the first time, I felt no need to initiate a thing. When I got home, the atmosphere was the same as always: impersonal, silent, uninhabited despite her being there. She was on the sofa, laptop on her legs, a vacant expression on her face. She only looked up when I walked toward the kitchen. She didn't ask how my day was. She just said, "You haven't said a word all day." And right there, I knew something had changed. Not in me, in her. Because until that moment, the distance had been her decision. But that afternoon, for the first time, she noticed the echo. The space she had demanded was starting to feel real, and not so comfortable anymore. I answered without harshness, without irony. "I thought that's what you wanted." She turned her eyes back to the laptop. She said nothing more, but the air grew dense, heavy, as if the absence of words was no longer peace, but a threat. That night, I went to bed without looking for her. I fell asleep quickly, and she took longer than usual to come to the room. I heard her walking. I heard her sigh. I heard her hesitate before getting into bed. She didn't touch me, but her body was closer than usual. Millimeters, maybe. And not out of desire. I knew that. But because for the first time, she was cold. The next day, she texted me mid-morning. "Nothing important, just, 'How are you?'" I replied politely, without enthusiasm. I told her I was going out for lunch, that I was hungry. She didn't ask where, or with whom. Not yet. But there was something in her trailing ellipsis that was not accidental. That Friday, when I went to the restaurant, Anna smiled at me, like always. She asked if I'd gotten any rest. I told her about the insomnia, about the bitter coffee at home. She laughed and brought me a cup with a little cinnamon in it. And it was there, in that simple gesture, that I understood everything. I wasn't falling in love. I was recovering. When I got home that night, she was showered and dressed, wearing nice pajamas, with that unnecessary level of care you notice when you know someone as well as I knew her. She asked if I wanted dinner. I said no. She looked at me for a few seconds too long, as if trying to read something on my face. She found nothing, because there was nothing left to defend. I wasn't fighting anymore. Not for her. Not for what we were. And that, more than my silence, was what began to unravel her. It didn't happen all at once. It was subtle, like everything with her. It started with details so small that, if I didn't know her so well, I would have thought them accidental. A cup of coffee on the counter around the time I usually woke up. A text at noon. "Are you okay?" An attempt at conversation, just as I was putting on my headphones. Little hooks cast into the air, hoping I would bite. But I didn't. Not out of pride. Not for revenge. It's just that when you start to heal, you no longer need the things you once begged for. A few days later, it became more obvious. One night, she waited for me with dinner on the table, something she hadn't done in months. I sat down, ate, and thanked her. She watched me, waiting for me to say something more, but I had nothing to add. I wasn't going to fake enthusiasm, not after being treated like an emotional burden for weeks. "You've been very quiet lately," she said, her voice soft. "I'm just giving you what you asked for," I replied, without raising my voice. She smiled, but not with joy. It was the smile of someone realizing they've lost control of the narrative. The next attempt was physical. One night, while I was brushing my teeth, she came into the bathroom silently, stood behind me, and wrapped her arms around my waist. Her hands on my stomach, her face on my shoulder. The same woman who weeks ago had pulled away from a simple touch was now seeking contact as if it were oxygen. I stood perfectly still. I didn't reject the gesture, but I didn't return it either. I finished rinsing my mouth, gently touched her hand, and left the bathroom without a word. Not because I felt nothing, but because I no longer trusted this sudden closeness. It wasn't love, it was fear. The fear of losing what she hadn't known how to keep. She started asking about my schedule, what time I left, who I had lunch with, if I was going to that restaurant a lot. She mentioned the name of the place casually, as if she wasn't interested, but she said it with venom, like someone who sticks a needle in and watches to see if you bleed. I just answered honestly, hiding nothing. And that sincerity hurt her more than any lie, because what was once distance was now my independence. And what started as her plea was now truly leaving her alone. That week, she asked if I wanted to watch a movie together. I told her I didn't feel like it, that I was tired. The next day, she tried again with dinner. We can talk if you want, but I didn't want to anymore. Or rather, I no longer needed to talk to her to feel at peace. I had spent weeks trying to understand why she was pulling away. Now, with the distance having become my new normal, she was the one who was starting to have questions. And I no longer had any answers. That afternoon, I didn't go straight home. I stayed at the restaurant a little longer, having coffee with Anna, talking about nothing. Nothing deep, nothing committed. But I felt good, calm, and after so much emotional wear and tear, that was gold. There was something in the way she looked at me that wasn't demanding or needy. It was pure, present attention. And I, who had learned to live in emotional scarcity, was beginning to recognize what it felt like to be seen. I didn't tell her what I was about to do, but I decided right then and there. Not for Anna, but for me, because I couldn't pretend for one more day. When I arrived home, she was in the dining room, hair done, makeup on, with a dinner served that no longer smelled of reconciliation, but of desperation. I thought we could talk, she said, forcing a smile. We can talk, I replied, hanging up my keys without taking off my coat. She sat across from me, nervous, as if the script was falling apart in her hands. She talked about what we used to be, how she missed the simple things, how she didn't know why she had pushed me away so far. I think I was scared, she said through tears. Me too, I told her. But my fear went away when you stopped looking for me. The conversation didn't last long. It shattered when I said the one thing she never expected to hear. I'm going to file for divorce. She went silent. Then she laughed, as if it were a joke. What? Are you crazy? Why? Because I don't want to be with you anymore. Because there's nothing left. Because when you asked me for space, you left. And I learned how to live without you. And then came the screaming, the crying, the breakdown. She called me selfish, a traitor, a coward. She asked how I could do this to her after so many years, that I was confused, that there had to be another woman. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. There wasn't another woman. There was another piece. And for her, that was so much worse. Because there was no one to blame. When she ran out of arguments, out of tears, out of strength, I spoke to her with the kind of calm you learn the hard way. Don't worry, I don't want anything from you. The house is yours. I'll leave. I'm already looking at an apartment. You'll hear from my lawyer soon. She tried to grab my arm, but she had no emotional hold on me anymore. Are you really going to leave me? She whispered. I looked at her serenely, not with hatred, not even with sadness, just with the brutal clarity of someone who no longer wants to be where they were no longer loved. I'm not leaving you, I said. You left me the day you asked for space. The end doesn't always arrive with an obvious betrayal. Sometimes it begins with a single phrase, spoken with a chilling calm. I need space. And because you love her, you obey. You give her what she asks. You let her breathe. You leave her to herself. But what she doesn't know, and what you don't realize at first, is that in that silence, you begin to breathe too. And when a man starts to breathe freely, he also begins to think, to remember the man he was before he started begging for a single glance, to rebuild himself piece by piece on a foundation of dignity. Her greatest mistake wasn't walking away. It was believing I would simply wait, that the space she requested was just a park bench where I would sit, flowers in hand, like some patient fool. But I didn't. I stood up and I walked away. And on the other side of that pain, I discovered something far more cruel than infidelity: indifference. That is what shattered everything. Not a third person, not a lie. It was the certainty that she was no longer fighting for us, because she took it for granted that I would never leave. She was wrong. Today, I live alone. But I am not empty, because the only thing worse than being without someone is being with someone who no longer sees you. I learned that sometimes there is no need for punishment. All that is needed is to walk away in silence, with clarity and with your soul intact. True freedom isn't being single. It's no longer needing to beg for affection. Has anyone ever asked you for space, only for it to be too late for them to return when you finally gave it? Share your story in the comments, or just leave a broken heart emoji if you know exactly what I'm talking about.